When we begin this journey together, I want to let you know exactly where we are headed. In this video, we are going to uncover one of Carl Jung's most profound and life-changing ideas: the shadow. We'll start by understanding what the shadow is and why Jung believed it holds both the darkness we fear and the power we crave. We'll explore how ignoring the shadow leaves us trapped in cycles of fear, insecurity, and projection, while facing it opens the door to strength, creativity, authenticity, and even love. Along the way, we'll talk about why society teaches us to hide our shadow, how childhood shapes it, what happens when we deny it, and why Jung insisted that the key to real growth lies not in suppressing the darkness, but in integrating it. We'll go into how to recognize your own shadow, how it appears in your daily life through triggers, jealousy, and hidden desires, and how you can begin the brave work of integration. By the end, you'll see that the very parts of yourself you've been running from may actually be the source of your deepest power, freedom, and wholeness. So let's begin. When Carl Jung first spoke about the shadow, he wasn't talking about a small idea, a passing thought, or a metaphor. He was describing something fundamental about the human psyche. Jung believed that the shadow is made up of everything we reject, deny, or hide from others and ourselves. It's the side of us that society tells us is unacceptable, the parts of our personality that don't fit neatly into the image we want to present to the world. But here's the paradox. The more we hide the shadow, the more it controls us. And the more we learn to face it, the more it gives us back the strength, authenticity, and inner peace we long for. Think about your own life for a moment. How often have you felt that there's a side of you that you can't show? Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's envy. Maybe it's a desire for power, recognition, or freedom that feels too selfish, too dangerous, or too shameful to admit. From an early age, most of us are taught to suppress these feelings. We're told to be good, to behave, to please others, to be polite. Over time, we build a mask, what Jung called the persona, the version of ourselves we present to the world. But behind that mask, the shadow waits. Now, it's important to understand that the shadow isn't only about bad qualities. Yes, it contains anger, greed, selfishness, and impulses we don't want to admit. But it also contains strength, creativity, sexuality, intuition, and vitality that we've been taught to hide. In many ways, the shadow is not just the darkness within us. It is also the power we are most afraid to unleash. That's why Jung said that the shadow is 90% pure gold. Let's consider an example. Imagine a child who is naturally assertive, bold, and outspoken. But perhaps in their family, they are constantly told to be quiet, to not speak out, to be obedient. Over time, the child learns that being assertive is bad or unacceptable. So they push that part of themselves down into the unconscious. As an adult, this person might appear soft-spoken, agreeable, and compliant, but deep down, there's a powerful assertiveness locked away. They may struggle with setting boundaries, speaking their truth, or standing up for themselves. Yet, the very power they need is hidden in the shadow they were forced to deny. This is why Jung's idea of the shadow is not about simply avoiding our darkness. It's about realizing that what we repress could also be our greatest strength. The traits that embarrass us or that others criticize may actually hold the keys to our growth. But there's a catch. We can't access that power until we face it. Let's pause and reflect on this truth. Every time you feel triggered by someone else, when their behavior stirs up intense anger, jealousy, or disgust, it's usually because they are showing you something about your own shadow. Maybe it's a quality you've repressed, or maybe it's something you secretly wish you could embody but don't allow yourself to. Jung said that what we dislike most in others often points us directly toward our shadow. This is projection, and it's one of the clearest ways to identify what's hidden inside us. Take another example. Perhaps you know someone who always takes the spotlight, who craves attention, who shines with confidence. You might feel irritated by them, maybe even resentful. But ask yourself, what is this really showing me? Is it possible that deep down, you long to express yourself more boldly, but your shadow tells you that wanting attention is vain, selfish, or wrong? The irritation you feel is less about them and more about the part of you that longs to live freely but is trapped in the dark. This is the fascinating thing about the shadow. It doesn't go away just because we deny it. In fact, it finds ways to leak out, often in the most destructive ways. That's why people sometimes sabotage themselves, lash out unexpectedly, or fall into unhealthy patterns. The shadow, ignored for too long, demands to be seen, and when we resist it, it can consume us. Jung even warned that those who ignore their shadow risk being controlled by it entirely. But here's the hope. The shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to complete you. Think about the yin and yang symbol, the circle of black and white. Inside the black, there is a dot of white, and inside the white, a dot of black. This symbolizes the truth Jung understood so deeply. You are not meant to be only light, only good, only perfect. You are meant to be whole. And wholeness comes when you embrace both your light and your darkness. When you accept the shadow, you stop running from yourself. You stop wasting energy trying to look perfect. You stop projecting your fears onto others. Instead, you reclaim the parts of yourself that you've buried. And when you reclaim them, you find that they are not as frightening as you thought. In fact, they are powerful. Consider artists, leaders, and visionaries throughout history. Many of them had turbulent, complex inner lives. They faced their shadows, whether through art, struggle, or deep reflection. And in doing so, they unlocked creativity, courage, and originality that changed the world. Jung himself believed that creativity often comes directly from the unconscious, from the shadow, from the parts of us that lie outside of polite, controlled, conscious awareness. The real danger is not the shadow itself. It's ignoring it. Because the shadow thrives in secrecy. It feeds on denial. When we say, "That's not me, I would never do that," the shadow whispers, "Yes, you would. You just don't want to admit it." And that's when it begins to take control from behind the scenes. But when we turn toward it, when we say, "Yes, I see you, I accept that you are part of me," something extraordinary happens. The shadow softens. It becomes less threatening. And slowly, it begins to give us back the energy we've been using to suppress it. This is why Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real transformation doesn't come from pretending to be pure light. It comes from having the courage to look into the dark corners of the soul and saying, "I see you, and I am not afraid." So let's imagine this as a journey. At first, you walk into a dark cave. It's cold, it's quiet, and the shadows dance on the walls. You feel uneasy, unsure if you should keep going. But then you realize, what you fear in this cave isn't some monster waiting to devour you. It's the parts of yourself you've left behind. As you pick them up, one by one, you begin to feel stronger. You see that the cave was never a prison. It was a treasure chest. And everything you've been seeking, confidence, creativity, strength, love, was hidden there, waiting for you to claim it. And that's the paradox of Jung's shadow. The very thing you've been running from is the source of the power you are seeking. As we go deeper into this exploration, let's ask an honest question. Why do we resist the shadow so much? Why is it so difficult to simply acknowledge what's inside us? The truth is, from the very beginning of our lives, we are conditioned to believe that only certain traits are acceptable. If you think back to childhood, you may remember moments when you were scolded for crying, punished for being angry, or told to hide your disappointment. Maybe you were told that boys shouldn't cry, that girls shouldn't be loud, that anger is dangerous, or that wanting more is greedy. Little by little, these messages carved deep pathways in your psyche. You learn to exile certain feelings, to lock them away where no one could see them. That is the very beginning of the shadow. Jung believed that childhood is where the foundations of the shadow are built. Children are naturally whole. They express a wide range of emotions and impulses without shame. But society cannot handle that rawness. So, society trains us. Parents, teachers, peers, culture, all work together to shape us into someone acceptable. And while this is necessary for living in a community, it comes at a cost. The parts of ourselves that don't fit the mold are sent into hiding. A child who is too sensitive learns to toughen up. A child who is too bold learns to shrink. A child who is too curious learns to stay quiet. Each of these abandoned parts becomes part of the shadow. But here's the important point. They don't disappear. They live on in the unconscious, waiting. And because they live in the unconscious, they often reappear in ways we can't control. They show up in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in sudden outbursts, in jealousy, in fantasies, and in the strong emotions we feel toward others. Jung was fascinated by these eruptions of the unconscious. He saw them as clues pointing to the shadow's presence. Let's take jealousy as an example. Imagine you see someone living with boldness and freedom. Maybe they quit their job to travel the world, or they started their own business, or they speak their mind without fear. You feel a rush of irritation or envy. Part of you might even criticize them. They're reckless, they're selfish, they're irresponsible. But if you look deeper, the shadow is speaking. What if that irritation is actually a signal? A reminder that there is a part of you that longs for that same freedom, but you've buried it because it felt too dangerous to admit? This is how the shadow communicates, not directly, but through the emotions that catch us off guard. Jung often spoke of projections. A projection happens when you see in others what you cannot accept in yourself. If you deny your own anger, you may see others as aggressive. If you deny your ambition, you may accuse others of being power-hungry. If you deny your sensitivity, you may judge others for being weak. But here's the fascinating part. Projections are not accidents. They are invitations. They are the psyche's way of showing you what you've hidden. Jung suggested that every strong reaction to another person is a chance to learn something about yourself. This is why relationships are such powerful mirrors. The people closest to us often reveal our shadow most clearly. Think about a partner, a friend, or even a family member who irritates you the most. The intensity of your reaction is usually less about who they are and more about what they awaken in you. They bring the unconscious to the surface. And if you're brave enough to ask, what does this say about me? What am I denying in myself? You begin the process of shadow integration. But integration is not simple. It requires courage, patience, and honesty. Jung never said that facing the shadow is easy. In fact, he warned that it is some of the most difficult work a human can do. Why? Because it means admitting things about yourself that you don't want to see. It means confronting the parts of you that feel shameful, ugly, or frightening. It means stepping into the unknown. Yet, paradoxically, the moment you begin this work, life starts to change. Think about it this way. If you spend your whole life running from your shadow, you are never truly free. You are always avoiding, always defending, always performing. But when you face the shadow, you break those chains. Suddenly, you no longer need to hide. You no longer need to fear being exposed. You can relax into being human, flawed, complex, whole. And this wholeness is where power comes from. Jung believed that the shadow contains not only destructive impulses, but also the energy of the unlived life. Every part of you that you've repressed still holds energy. When you lock it away, that energy is wasted. But when you reclaim it, it returns to you as strength. Imagine how much energy you've spent over the years trying to suppress anger, hide jealousy, control desires, or deny your own boldness. Now imagine what happens when all that energy comes back to you. That's the power Jung was pointing to. Let's explore an example in everyday life. Consider someone who is terrified of confrontation. They avoid conflict at all costs. On the surface, they may appear kind, easygoing, agreeable, but deep down, they've buried their own anger and assertiveness in the shadow. This makes them vulnerable. They are easily taken advantage of. They struggle to set boundaries. They may even feel resentful, but they never express it. What happens if they begin to reclaim their shadow? What happens if they face their anger and accept that it is part of them? Suddenly, they gain access to assertiveness. They can now stand up for themselves. They can draw clear boundaries. They can protect their energy. Their life changes, not because they became less kind, but because they integrated the strength that was always there, hidden in the shadow. Or think about someone who has repressed their creativity. Maybe they were told as a child that art is a waste of time, that imagination is silly, that they should focus only on practical things. So, they bury their creativity. They grow up to be practical, efficient, and reliable. But deep down, something is missing. They feel an emptiness, a longing they can't explain. When they begin to face their shadow, they may rediscover their creative side. They may find themselves painting, writing, playing music, or dreaming in ways they haven't since childhood. And in doing so, they feel alive again. That aliveness is the gift of the shadow. Jung often said that the shadow is the door to the self, the larger, deeper wholeness of who we are. To meet the self, we must first pass through the shadow. This means that every time we face a fear, a trigger, or an uncomfortable truth about ourselves, we are taking a step toward our own wholeness. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the gateway. But let's be honest, society doesn't encourage this kind of work. We live in a culture obsessed with image, performance, and perfection. Social media shows us polished surfaces. Schools and workplaces reward compliance. Even in spirituality and self-help, there is often pressure to focus only on positive vibes, on love, light, and gratitude. And while positivity is important, Jung warned that an obsession with the light is itself a trap. If we focus only on light and deny the dark, we create a split within ourselves. That split grows into suffering. Real spirituality, Jung argued, is not about escaping darkness. It is about embracing it. So, how do we begin this work of shadow integration? The first step is awareness. Start by noticing your triggers. Notice who irritates you, who makes you jealous, who makes you uncomfortable. Instead of dismissing those reactions, ask yourself, what is this revealing about me? What am I denying that this person is showing me? At first, this can feel humbling, but over time, it becomes liberating. The second step is honesty. Be willing to admit your feelings, even if they shock you. Maybe you feel envy, resentment, or even hatred. That doesn't mean you are a bad person. It means you are human. Remember, having a shadow is not a flaw. It is part of being alive. The problem is not the shadow itself, but our refusal to see it. The third step is acceptance. Instead of fighting your shadow, welcome it. Imagine saying to yourself, yes, this too is part of me. I don't need to act on it, but I don't need to deny it either. This acceptance creates space. It softens the inner conflict. It allows you to breathe. And finally, integration means finding healthy ways to express what was once hidden. If you've denied your anger, learn to channel it into strength and boundaries. If you've denied your creativity, give yourself permission to create again. If you've denied your need for recognition, find authentic ways to be seen. Integration is not about indulging every impulse. It's about transforming the raw energy of the shadow into conscious power. This process is lifelong. Jung never promised that the shadow could be finished or defeated. It evolves with us. As long as we are human, there will always be parts of ourselves that are hidden, waiting to be seen. But the more we engage with this process, the freer we become, the more we stop running, the more we live as whole beings. And when we live as whole beings, we discover something remarkable: compassion. When you face your own shadow, you stop judging others so harshly. You see that everyone has a shadow. Everyone is struggling with hidden fears, desires, and wounds. This understanding makes you kinder, more empathetic, more human. In this way, shadow work not only transforms your relationship with yourself, it transforms your relationships with the world. When you begin to see that every human being carries a shadow, you also begin to realize that most of the conflicts in the world, whether between individuals, communities, or nations, are often projections of the shadow. What we cannot accept in ourselves, we condemn in others. This is why Jung believed that shadow work was not only personal but also collective. If each of us fails to confront our own shadow, we unconsciously feed division, hatred, and violence in the world around us. Consider how often groups define themselves by projecting their unwanted traits onto outsiders. One community might accuse another of being immoral, dangerous, or corrupt, while ignoring the same tendencies within their own ranks. This pattern has repeated throughout history, fueling prejudice, war, and persecution. Jung warned that unless humanity learns to face its collective shadow, it will continue to destroy itself. In his view, real peace can only come when individuals take responsibility for their own inner darkness, rather than blaming it on others. On a smaller scale, think about how this plays out in everyday relationships. A partner might accuse the other of being controlling, when in reality, they themselves harbor a deep fear of losing control. A friend might complain about someone being arrogant, when secretly they wish they had the same confidence. Families often pass shadows down through generations. Anger, shame, guilt, and fear get buried but never resolved, until someone is brave enough to break the cycle. To do so requires one simple but profound decision: to stop projecting and start looking inward. But how exactly do we do that in practice? Jung's insights offer some guidance. One of the most powerful tools for shadow integration is paying attention to dreams. Jung devoted much of his work to dream analysis because he believed that dreams are the language of the unconscious. In dreams, the shadow often appears in symbolic form, as a stranger, an enemy, an animal, or even a monster. These figures can be frightening, but they are not meaningless. They are messages. They are ways the unconscious tries to speak to us, to show us what we've ignored. Jung encouraged people to write down their dreams, to reflect on the characters and emotions within them, and to ask, what part of me is being revealed here? Beyond dreams, the body itself can reveal the shadow. Notice how emotions show up physically: tightness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, a sinking feeling in the stomach. These sensations often carry messages from the unconscious. When you feel triggered or overwhelmed, instead of dismissing the feeling, pause and ask, what is my shadow trying to show me here? Sometimes the answer is surprising. You might realize that beneath anger is fear, beneath jealousy is longing, beneath resentment is a desire for freedom. The shadow hides, but it always leaves clues. Jung also believed in the practice of active imagination. This involves entering into dialogue with the images, emotions, or figures that emerge from the unconscious. Imagine sitting quietly, closing your eyes, and inviting a shadow figure from a dream or a memory to speak to you. What would it say? How would you respond? This practice can sound unusual, but Jung found it to be a powerful way of bridging the gap between the conscious mind and the unconscious. It allows you to interact with the shadow directly, rather than just theorizing about it. But here's the challenge. The shadow is not polite. It will not tell you only what you want to hear. Sometimes it confronts you with truths you've avoided for years. It might reveal that you crave recognition, even though you've told yourself you are selfless. It might reveal that you fear intimacy, even though you present yourself as loving. It might reveal that you secretly envy those you criticize most. This confrontation can be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. Every time you acknowledge a truth, you free yourself from the exhausting effort of denial. This raises an important point. Shadow work is not about indulging every dark impulse or acting out destructive desires. Integration is not permission for chaos. Instead, it is about transforming raw, unconscious energy into conscious strength. For example, the energy of anger can become healthy assertiveness. The energy of envy can become inspiration to grow. The energy of fear can become caution and wisdom. The shadow contains raw material. Our job is to shape it into something useful, rather than letting it explode unconsciously. Let's bring this closer to daily life with a practical scenario. Imagine someone who has always denied their competitiveness. They tell themselves they are not ambitious, that they don't care about winning, but deep down, they have a strong drive to succeed. Because they deny it, this competitiveness leaks out in subtle ways: passive-aggressive remarks, resentment when others succeed, or self-sabotage when they get close to success themselves. If they integrate their shadow, they no longer need to hide this drive. They can admit, yes, I want to achieve, and that's okay. Suddenly, the energy that once caused bitterness now fuels purposeful action. The shadow becomes a source of motivation instead of conflict. Or consider someone who represses their sensuality. Perhaps cultural or religious conditioning has told them that desire is sinful or shameful. They bury it deep, but it leaks out in guilt-ridden fantasies or unhealthy attachments. When they begin to face this shadow, they discover that sensuality is not inherently wrong. It is a natural part of being human. Integrated consciously, it becomes a source of intimacy, creativity, and vitality. Jung believed that the integration of the shadow is not only about personal growth, but also about destiny. He argued that the parts of ourselves we deny are often linked to the life we are meant to live. The qualities we reject may hold the very gifts we are here to offer. This is why he said that the gold is in the dark. To ignore the shadow is to ignore your potential. To embrace it is to step fully into the life that is waiting for you. But what about the fear? Because let's be honest, the shadow can feel terrifying. Jung understood this deeply. He described facing the shadow as an initiation, a kind of psychological death and rebirth. You must be willing to let go of the image you've built of yourself, the good person, the flawless persona, and accept that you are more complex than you imagined. That process feels like losing control, like stepping into the unknown. But it is only by losing the false self that you can uncover the true self. Think of it like entering a forest at night. At first, the trees are dark and unfamiliar. Every sound makes you uneasy. You fear what might be lurking in the shadows. But as your eyes adjust, you realize that the forest is alive with beauty. You hear the whispers of leaves, the rhythm of crickets, the hidden streams flowing quietly. What once felt threatening now feels sacred. This is the journey of the shadow. At first, it is frightening, but with courage and persistence, it becomes a place of wonder and wisdom. And here's the paradox. The people who seem most whole, most powerful, are often those who have walked through their own darkness. They do not pretend to be perfect. They do not deny their flaws. Instead, they stand grounded, authentic, unshaken by criticism or praise. They are not controlled by their shadow because they have made peace with it. They carry an aura of strength that comes not from denial, but from integration. This is the power Jung was pointing to. The power you are seeking is not out there, in achievements, recognition, or external validation. It is in here, in the parts of yourself you've been running from. Your shadow is not a curse. It is your ally. It is the map to your wholeness, the key to your freedom, the source of the power you've been searching for. But you might be wondering, what happens if I don't do this work? What if I ignore the shadow completely? Jung had a clear answer. The shadow ignored does not disappear, it grows. It begins to rule your life from behind the scenes. It erupts in anger, in depression, in compulsions, in addictions. It colors your relationships, your choices, your dreams. In extreme cases, when the shadow is denied for too long, it can take over entirely, leading to what Jung called possession, when a person becomes dominated by the very forces they refuse to face. That is why shadow work is not just helpful, it is essential. So, the invitation is clear. The shadow is calling. It has been with you since childhood. It has whispered in your dreams, tugged at your emotions, and shown itself in the mirrors of your relationships. It has caused you pain, yes, but it also holds your hidden strength. The question is, will you keep running, or will you turn to face it? If you choose to turn toward the shadow, the journey will not be easy, but it will be worth it. Jung made it clear that confronting the shadow is not about quick fixes or instant enlightenment. It is a lifelong process, a dialogue between the conscious and unconscious mind. Every stage of life reveals new aspects of the shadow, and every step you take into awareness deepens your wholeness. You are not meant to banish the shadow. You are meant to walk with it. One of the most liberating truths Jung gave us is that you are not alone in this struggle. Every person you know carries a shadow. The perfection you see in others is an illusion. Beneath the surface, everyone is wrestling with hidden fears, suppressed desires, and unacknowledged wounds. Realizing this can bring tremendous relief. You no longer need to compare yourself to others or believe that you are uniquely flawed. Instead, you can see yourself as part of the human story, a story of light and darkness intertwined. And yet, the courage to face the shadow is rare. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding it. They distract themselves with work, with entertainment, with possessions, with endless activity, anything to avoid the quiet moments where the shadow might speak. But if you are watching this now, perhaps you feel that the time has come to stop running. Perhaps you are ready to reclaim what has been lost. Perhaps you are beginning to see that the life you want, the strength, the creativity, the freedom, is waiting on the other side of your fear. So how do you begin? Start small. When you feel irritated or jealous, pause and ask, what is this teaching me about myself? When you notice a recurring dream or a powerful fantasy, write it down and reflect on its meaning. When you feel a surge of emotion that seems out of proportion to the situation, consider that the shadow may be speaking. These small acts of awareness open the door. They create space for integration to happen naturally, without force. It is also important to cultivate compassion for yourself. Facing the shadow can stir up shame and guilt. You may remember things you regret or desires you wish you didn't have. But remember this, the shadow is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that you are human. Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness includes imperfection. To accept your shadow is to accept your humanity. Over time, as you walk this path, you may notice subtle but profound changes. You may feel less defensive, less reactive. You may find yourself laughing at things that once triggered you. You may discover hidden talents, passions, and strengths that make you feel alive again. Your relationships may deepen as you no longer need to hide behind masks. Even your sense of spirituality may expand as you realize that the divine is not only in the light, but also in the dark. This is why Jung insisted that the gold is in the dark. He understood that the very qualities you've been ashamed of may hold your greatest gifts. Your anger can become your courage. Your envy can become your ambition. Your fear can become your wisdom. Your wounds can become your compassion. The shadow does not diminish you, it completes you. And here is perhaps the most empowering truth. When you embrace your shadow, you take back your power from the world. No longer do you need others to approve of you. No longer do you need to maintain a perfect image. No longer do you need to fear being found out. You can stand openly in your truth, knowing that you are not defined by your light or your darkness alone, but by the wholeness of your being. This is real freedom. This is real power. So, as we close this exploration, let's return to where we began. The shadow is the source of the power you are seeking. It is the treasure hidden in the cave you fear to enter. It is the part of yourself that you've run from, criticized, and denied. But it is also the part that holds your vitality, your authenticity, and your strength. Jung's message was clear. Do not fear the shadow. Turn toward it. Listen to it. Learn from it. Integrate it. In doing so, you will not become perfect, but you will become whole. And wholeness is what you were made for. Imagine years from now, looking back at your life and realizing that the moments you feared most, the moments when your shadow came to light, were actually the turning points that made you who you are. That every trigger, every jealousy, every outburst was not a failure but an invitation. That every time you faced the dark, you stepped closer to the light of your true self. That is the gift Jung wanted us to see. So, the next time you feel the pull of the shadow, remember this. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to show you the gold you've hidden from yourself. Step into the cave. Trust the process. Reclaim your power. And know that in the union of light and dark, in the acceptance of your full humanity, you will find the strength, the freedom, and the wholeness you've been seeking all along.